Welcome everyone, Martin Turner here. This week we're going to look at going forward, and I've got some quotes from some students I taught in New Zealand this subject. We're just starting teaching this subject here in this degree now. This is the first accounting course that has offered me the opportunity to not regurgitate black and white answers and to suggest answers based on my own proper judgment. There is no other explanation. I love it. I love having no definitive answers. Such is the subjectivity of the real world. And this student's comment in their final assignment in that previous unit. As I get to the last 2 weeks of my university degree, I feel like this paper is becoming the be-all and end-all to my degree. I couldn't wish for a better capstone course to round off my undergraduate tertiary education. I feel like I've intellectually moved to a different level of critical thinking without even really noticing. Until now, obviously. I definitely felt more confident with this assignment than any of the others. I don't know why this is. I tried my best to back everything up with reasonable explanations like my feedback has told me to. So there's a couple of comments from people who did the unit in New Zealand. So you'll be looking at how you'll be finishing off your assignment, but also have a chance to reflect on what you've learned so far and also about where to now. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to have a look at what this unit has been about. We're going to have a look at the unit learning outcomes and we can have a think about how what we've learned and not learned. We're going to just review learning for understanding and some of the elements in this subject. Then there'll be plenty of time for your questions. And I'll also be flagging that we have...
You are in the Zoom meeting now.
Hello, Sarah. And that we'll also be having... I'll also mention briefly that there are marking opportunities for those people who might be coming towards the end of the degree. And also I'll be showing... We'll have a look at the video on about going forward. It's called It's Now Up to You. There's some great videos every week. This is one of them. All right, so let's have a look at what this unit has been about. What has it been about? Well, here are the learning outcomes, which are on successful completion of this unit, you'll be able to apply established techniques for analysing financial statement information for forecasting, valuation and risk analysis purposes. So you can think about what you might have learned or not learned. Established techniques for analysing financial statement information. So we've been using the DCF and economic profit frameworks. Apply the major concepts and theories of fundamental analysis and the key steps involved in conducting a fundamental analysis and valuation of a company. So you're still in the midst of that, of varying your firm, but we've been looking at the major concepts and theories around financial statement analysis, and you've been having the opportunity to apply them to your firm. And but of course, and for some people, analysing financial statements will become quite a focus. It certainly was in my career. But for many people, and in giving advice to clients for a whole range of reasons, but using financial statement information to identify and recommend solutions to various financial challenges. So the ability to be able to use financial statements to connect to what's going on with the business is the basis for being able to give advice and provides advice or solutions various issues that people might have that you're giving advice to. Analyse and synthesise a firm's financial statement information in the context of the firm's economic and business conditions to make informed recommendations on investment decisions about the firm. And that's what you'll be doing in your final assignment. And so it's a good chance now just to reflect on what have I learned or not learned in this unit, how might my expectations been met or not met, or what's been different. So my first question for you is, to what extent do the unit learning outcomes reflect or not reflect your experience of learning in this unit? So here they are here. Just have a quick go at writing down your thoughts on that. To what extent do the unit learning outcomes, whether they reflect or not reflect your experience of learning in this unit? I'll give you a few minutes. Well, we've got one response. Well, we've got one response. We might run with that. The unit learning outcomes reflect everything assignment 1 and 2 have done so far. But we have also had a big emphasis on communication too, peer-wise, Facebook, group assignment, feedback. So who gave us that? Who made that comment?
Hi, Martin. It's Yvette. That was my comment.
That was your comment, Yvette? So
yes.
you found this, you also you made an emphasis on the communication with other students. So how have you found that? How have you found that?
It takes me back to the ACCT online and communication unit.
Mm-hmm.
It's different because no other unit that I've done at university has had such an emphasis on actually talking to other people.
Yeah.
And I'm almost at the end of my degree, so yeah, it's very different, but it is good. I think having that peer review feedback, I think it's pretty realistic of what the real world is like. When you're working, you're not just going to be there by yourself. Quite often you're going to have to ask other people you're working with, hey, could you check this, what I've done? Does it all line up? So I feel like it's good practice, even though it's a bit foreign.
Bit foreign. Do you prefer just to be sort of left by yourself to get on with it, or do you prefer to interact with other people?
Well, I am doing distance education, so I do like to be left alone most of the time. And I work quite well by myself, but yeah, not always how it's going to be though.
So why do you prefer working by yourself?
I just think I like having all the responsibility to me, It's my job to get things done and I get them done as I see. So, but I do understand there is a lot of value in other people's opinions and thoughts and stuff, so.
Yeah, because you can often find, you do have individual accountability in all your subjects because it's your mark, isn't it? But in terms of, do you feel like it's more efficient just to get on with it yourself?
Sometimes. I think because a lot of the communication is online, you might post something, but it's not a conversation you're having in real time. So you post it, you wait a little bit, you come back and then you get a response and then you make your response. So I think in that way, it sometimes feels like it's inefficient. But when you get to the end of it and look back, you go, oh yeah, I see how that's actually helped my work instead of hindering it. So yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Do you know that 90% of what you learn at university, you learn through interacting with other students? Whether you're doing distance or face-to-face.
Yeah.
And so you interact with the content, and you interact with staff. But the staff, there's only so many staff. The staff are all great in the unit, by the way. They're great to interact with. And we do have a lot of staff students. But the students and also the other students in the unit are going through the same experience as you. And so, and so they're grappling with the different issues just as you are. So that's interesting comments. Yvette, and is this your last term? Do you finish this term?
Well, fingers crossed, if I pass everything, I'm finished this term, so.
That's right. There's always that. I know there's the assumption, but yeah. Oh, that's great. So that's great. So this, any capstone unit like this is designed to give you a chance just to reflect on your whole degree, and just what you got, didn't get, and where, and just sort of put the links together. I felt like I was using techniques to understand the financial statements, but it felt more logic-based than knowledge-based the further I went into the work. So who made that comment there? That's interesting. I was using techniques, but it felt more logic-based than knowledge-based. Does that mean you were thinking that you were sort of just going through the techniques and just sort of connecting the different things rather than connecting with the business, or what do you mean by that?
Basically what I felt was that I would use the techniques to ground what I was doing for identifying the realities, basically, to ground it in the looking at the financial statements. But when I was actually working through it, it felt like I was more looking towards logically, where did this come from in reality? Which felt a bit weird for me because I was more facts and figures for the rest of the accounting degree, and then this was just like, okay, in reality, where would this actually arise out of?
Yeah, and Sarah, is it? Sarah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's interesting. I think you're talking a little bit about sort of problem solving, critical thinking, sort of logic, as opposed to just dealing with the facts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's good. That's good because you need to be able to deal with the facts, obviously, or you can't give advice. But that's great. So I think you're saying you're getting some experience of that, of moving away from. It's another way of saying it, perhaps, is just moving away from looking at the numbers to looking at what the numbers might be telling us and how to communicate that to other people. Would there be a sense of that there too, Sarah, or not?
Yeah, I think so. But it was just really weird because I'm like, all right, I need to turn these numbers into an understanding of what actually would cause them to do what they do in the business at the time.
Yeah.
And I wasn't looking at why this asset or that asset and how it might depreciate like I might in an accounting sort of problem. This value changed to this value because.
Yep, that's great.
I was looking at, this shift in the global economy caused this to be more likely to happen, and this is reflected in this change.
Now that's good. And of course, there's that subjective element in making judgments. Now that's very articulate, Sarah. I understand that. Any other comments? We've had two from our Zoom people. But if there are no more, let's just have a look if any more. Oh, here's a third one. I related to each criteria in the learning outcomes as I worked through the unit. So what did you mean by you related to them? Could you sort of see that you were learning something about them? Or who made that third comment?
I did.
Oh, and who's that?
Melissa.
Oh, Melissa. Hello, Melissa. So what did you mean you related to each criteria? So you could sort of see, does that mean you could sort of see you learnt something in relation to them, or?
Yes, I could sort of see it, one building on the next, and yeah.
Yeah, so you had some connection to it.
Yeah.
So do you mean by that you learnt some techniques, or what do you mean? You can say whatever you like, it doesn't matter, Because there was about applying, wasn't there? There was quite a bit of applying techniques. Did you feel that you would you've been, I know you haven't finished your assignment too yet, but do you feel you're being able to apply them, and you're in that process at the moment?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. All right. So it's always good to just reflect on what you've learned in a unit, but a capstone unit gives you a chance just to reflect on what you learned on the degree. You only finish your degree once, and hopefully, Yvette, this is your term when you finish the unit, you finish the degree, and there'll be numbers of other people in that situation. Here's a quote from a student in our unit this term at the beginning, in step 1. It's been over 2 years since I've had Martin as a lecturer, and I have nearly forgotten over that time how powerful the way he writes his study guides are. The preface and chapter 1 are no different in that the way he writes forces me to engage with the content and not just sit there and mindlessly rote learn the content of the subject. As I began to read the preface, I remembered one of the key learning concepts Martin taught me back in 2017 when I studied accounting, learning and online communication. You can't be a passive learner. You need to be an active learner and get involved with the teachings so that your knowledge is not shallow and instead has a depth of significant understanding. So some people were able to sort of connect back to what they'd learned about learning, particularly in the first year, and particularly that idea of being active and not just sort of, and which means, you're thinking for yourself and connecting. So there was a number of people with that sort of thinking at the beginning of term, and we sort of reviewed some aspects of learning when we started the term. Now, some of the aspects of how we've been looking at experiencing learning this term has been, we went over the concept of learning, how we can conceive learning to be, and we sort of reviewed that. The 6 conceptions of learning. We can view learning as just a quantitative increase in knowledge, which it is, a quantitative increase in knowledge, but it can be so much more than that. So we looked at a quantitative increase in knowledge, then we had about reproducing it in assessments. So if you just think of a quantitative increase in knowledge, that's just vague. It's no purpose to it. You're not thinking of using it in any way, just sort of accumulating interesting facts. So quantitative increase in knowledge. So the next, applying it, say, in an assessment, it gives it some purpose, which is a bit more complex. And then the third is it includes the first 2, but also applying in the real world, say in the workplace. And so those 3, it's a bit more complex again than simply accumulating knowledge or just using it for an assessment or whatever. But those three, if we think of learning as being limited to those three, it includes those three. But if we think of it as limited to that, that will cause us to simply rote learn or be a passive learner. We'll just quantitatively increase. We just think that we'll just take the clear-cut facts. We won't try to understand them. And then we saw that there were other, more complex ways of conceiving learning. One was learning for understanding. And there was a bit of a sense of that from the previous quote. That's a bit more, that's quite a bit different. That's where we are in the classroom and we're trying to make our own sense of what the concepts mean to us. And it's still just in the classroom though. And so the next one, the fifth one was, which again includes all the previous ones, was changing the way we view aspects of the world. We've got a few quotes where we'll see some people in that area. So we start to view aspects of the world differently. So it's not just changing our understanding in the classroom, but it also changes the way we view things around us, particularly in business. And then the sixth is changing as a person. Learning is about changing as a person. We change. As we change the way we view aspects of the world, we change the person. So learning at university and learning in any aspect of our lives can be like that. So we can conceive it as being these six different types of learning that become increasingly more complex. So we just reviewed that at the beginning of the year, and we had a look at that. For those who did accounting, learning and online communication in previous years, we looked at it then. So that was one aspect, being aware that there's different ways that we can experience our learning. And then intrinsic motivation, particularly around the assessment. The assessments are authentic in that they're real companies. You also get to do your reflective learning journals, which are your authentic response to the material. They're individualised. You get a different company each. Everybody's got a different company. And you also get some formative feedback along the way in various ways. And a lot of people can experience assessments like that. They can't. We just can't help but get interested in our companies. Just so interesting. And if we are interested in business, then all our companies are so interesting. So the idea is quite a few people have experienced that they've found themselves getting more interested in the learning tasks, and they're conceiving learning as being more than just the rote learning, quantitative increase. And these two factors can affect how we approach our learning. And that's the idea of whether we approach our learning simply as rote learning or whether we also learn for understanding. Learning for understanding doesn't mean you don't learn the facts and rote learn and be able to reproduce the facts, but it's a lot more than that. It's more complex. So you can reflect on to what extent how you've experienced your learning this term in the unit and what you've been learning about learning. To what extent have you been learning more about how you learn and how you can learn in different contexts? I believe that I have, this again quotes from New Zealand students in the past, I believe that I have a fairly good understanding of my firm now. So do you feel that way yourself? I remember in assignment 1 I had never heard of my firm, but now it seems as if it is a part of my knowledge and experience. When I go grocery shopping, I always try to mystery shop and point out to my parents which brands that are owned by my firm. This makes grocery shopping just a tad bit more interesting. I also find that even out of lecture times, myself and other students are always discussing our firms and recent news events that could impact it. This is amazing, definitely not what I expected from studying this unit. So a number of people have got very interested in their firms. This whole process, and you see how they're changing the way they view aspects of the world. They're going to the shopping centre, they're going to the supermarket. This particular firm had a lot of consumer products in supermarkets. And they're suddenly realising, the businesses that are behind all these products. This whole process has enthused me, so motivation, and is continually making me think, and connect everything that is going on in the world with my firm. I even talked about my firm in a job interview I had on Friday. I remember this student, they talked about their firm in the job interview. They were so interested in it. I did get a groan when I mentioned what company I was analysing. It appears one of my interviewers had done some work for them and was not impressed with the current state of its operations. So all our firms are real. They're real firms doing real things all the time with real people. Reading chapter 6 rekindled memories of studying my finance unit lecture notes. This again in New Zealand. Both readings talked about the same thing, i.e. effects of financial leverage, but the feeling I have while reading it now differs from what I felt while reading it from my finance unit. Perhaps the focus is different. My focus in my finance unit was to successfully regurgitate in an exam, whereas my focus now is to learn it. So that idea of learning for understanding. It is funny, in past papers like my finance unit in New Zealand, I would have superficially read the chapter with a base understanding of the information, but not really understanding and engaging with the information. With this reading and all the other readings, I found it just as difficult as my finance unit, but the difference is that I've been intrinsically driven to understand the information. Motivation. Instead of switching onto autopilot, as Martin alluded to in chapter 5, I'm fully focused and intent on understanding everything that meets the eye. I can't remember the last time that I was this motivated for a paper, let alone an accounting paper. How they could say let alone an accounting paper, but I understand what they mean. So some people who have been experiencing this, you can think about to what extent you've been getting motivated and interested in your company, and interested in some of the concepts we've been looking at, and to which extent or not. And so these were some quotes from previous students. On this chart, this is what university is all about. This is why we have universities and why you go to university. It's on this chart. Intellectual development. I worked in the financial markets 25 years. People had degrees hanging off them. You know, they could be from Harvard, all sorts of places. I met lots of people with degrees, but I didn't meet that many people who were tertiary educated, who had gone through this intellectual development. Most of us start university thinking there's a clear-cut black and white answer to everything. We come to uni to get the right answers. And we're going to get those answers from textbooks and from lectures. So we can come with that idea. And quite quickly, we start to realise it's not quite like that. There aren't clear-cut answers to everything. And there's always shades of grey around everything. For example, in Act 11081 yesterday, we were finishing off that unit, which is Introductory Financial Accounting. You might remember doing it a few years ago, where we we're just reviewing GST accounting and, you know, for example, asking questions like, are the items in the income statement and balance sheet, are they generally inclusive or exclusive of GST? All these sort of basic questions that you need to know if you're going to, you know, they're just fundamental questions. And so people were thinking about that. And the answer is that income statements and balance sheets are generally exclusive of GST. We have separate GST accounts, except for accounts payable, accounts receivable are one of the main exceptions to that in the balance sheet. And then I asked about the cash flow statement, inclusive or exclusive, and generally they are inclusive of GST. You know, we don't cash as cash, we don't take the GST, we don't have separate accounts of cash for GST. But Ryman Healthcare, it actually shows its cash flow statement as exclusive of GST. You do have some flexibility, particularly in New Zealand, to do that if you want to. It's a bit unusual. So there's shades of grey is the point. We can learn these basic things, the black and white stuff, you know, about whether things are exclusive of GST usually, but there's going to be difference, there's going to be shades of grey. So we need to understand more than just memorising some clear-cut facts, because they won't be right all the time. But so we start thinking there are right answers to everything, and then we can come to the view over time that there are no right answers, that everything's relative. In other words, it's all a game. Accounting's all a game, all our business disciplines are all a game. Most people in the financial markets, and most people don't go beyond this. They finish their degree, and here you are at the end of the degree. A lot of people at the end of the degree, this is where they're at. They feel there's no right answers, that it's all relative, it's just a game. You give the lecturer the answers they want to get the marks. You know, there's no right or wrong answers. You know, and most people come out thinking that. in the discipline they're studying. And the financial markets are full of people who think like this. They think it's all a game. They think accounting's all a game. You just play the numbers to get the... Look, don't break the law, but, that's it. And so, but some people go further. And this is what university's all about. And this is quite a difficult development, where you come to having personal commitments based on evidence. I think this is right for these reasons. And people who think like that, it's a different way of thinking. If you're starting to think like that, then you're a tertiary educated person. You're able to start to have views and opinions on things based on evidence. And you can give advice to people by saying, for this and this reason, I think these are your three options. You could do this or this. These are the various implications of those options, and I think you should do option 2 for this reason. And that's what giving advice is about. And it's having personal commitments based on evidence. Completely different way of thinking. So it's this intellectual development that the university is all about, and a lot of people don't get beyond here. So you can just have a reflection on that yourself, about how the way you think. This is quite a frightening little development at first, because it can be a bit uncertain. And you may have experienced a little bit of that in our unit, that sort of feeling of uncomfortableness as you're trying to figure out whether my views about anything mean anything, and the reasons why. Now, as we get to the end of our degree and end of our unit, some people feel like this. Highly appreciate, this was a New Zealand student, unwilling to finish this journey yet. Highly appreciate you to be with us during this journey. I really learn a lot from you. It is hard to describe my feelings so far. I'm really unwilling to finish this journey yet. So some people want to keep going. And this may or may not be you. And so, because you're starting to get a grip on some of these. And a number of people really enjoy learning. And if you can become really interested in learning, then you'll just learn lots of stuff throughout your professional career. You'll get good. So you can see this pattern of how we learn, conceptions of learning. We looked at the 6 types, being intrinsically motivated. So we instructed on the conceptions of learning. You've got the assessment particularly, will assess learning tasks particularly designed to support you become interested in them. And to give you some opportunities to experience learning for understanding. And the takeout from that is that can help you develop your critical thinking skills, help you develop the ability to think for yourself, to express opinions and give reasons why, and to start to think that there aren't clear-cut black and white answers to everything, but it's also not a game. It's not just no answer to anything. There are answers to things. They're personal commitments based on evidence. This is what I think and why. And you know what? Other experienced professionals, when you get along in your career, other professionals will have different views. They'll have personal commitments based on evidence that are different. And one of the ones that we looked at here is this whole idea about whether you can assess the value of a firm. And that's what we've been looking at here and getting the opportunity to have a go at it. Well, there are plenty of people in the financial markets who think it's not possible to do that, that you're kidding yourself trying to make all these forecasts, or too difficult. And they just try to predict share prices, say in 18 months' time. There's no evidence that anyone can do that, of course, but that's and they've got their reasons, and there's a lot of good reasons. And if I'm discussing with someone like that, I'm listening to it and I keep thinking about it. And then there are various reasons why, and including in the finance literature, evidence that you can do what the sort of things we're doing. So you'll be able to form your own views on that. And it's fine to have whatever views you have. It's the reasons and so forth. And when you're coming up with the value of your firm, it's your view of it and the reasons why. So this is this critical thinking. The ability to think for yourself. George Bernard Shaw, a well-known playwright 100 years ago, he said, most people think for themselves once a year. Once a year. George Bernard Shaw, I've made a career for myself by thinking for myself once a week. So if you can think for yourself, you're way ahead of average, and particularly if you can articulate good reasons. All right, so that's some of the issues that we've been looking at. Your questions. First of all, what was the most important thing you learned this term? This term. One thing. If you had to say one, if somebody asked you, what was the most important thing you learned in our unit this term, what would you say? The one thing. And you can say nothing, or you could say this one specific thing. What would it be? Just the first thing that comes to your mind. You've got 1 minute. 10 more seconds. We've got 3 responses. What was the most important thing you learned in our unit this term? When I began my accounting journey, I thought it would be very black and white. See, you think there's a clear-cut black and white answer to everything. Particularly in accounting, people think that, but everybody when they're starting uni, a lot of people can think that. Through this journey, I have learnt that there is very little that is definitive and much is relative. That's right. A lot of people are saying, for example, in their KCQs during the term that they've realised there's a lot of judgments in accounting. It's full of judgments. This unit has taught me that to really succeed, to really succeed in a professional environment, you have to take it a step further and be committed to think outside the box and have your own opinions. There is so much more than just numbers. So, this person's commenting. Who has said this one?
Melissa.
Yvette.
Melissa.
Oh, Melissa.
Melissa from Bundaberg.
You wrote this one. You wrote this ahead of time too, which is great. Melissa. So when you began your accounting journey, is that at the beginning of your degree? Did you think there was going to be a clear-cut answer to everything?
Most things.
Yeah. That's very common, isn't it? When we start, we think we're coming to the answers, but you don't think that anymore, or do you?
No, really the opposite.
Yeah. So now there are facts. You still need to be on top of the detail. There's detail, isn't there? So it's not like I can just skim it. You know how there are some people who you'll see them in the workplace and stuff, they just go around, they're all sort of full of being persuasive and chat, but they've got no depth, they've got no... Have you met people like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know those sort. And they've got no depth. So you don't want to be like that. And you're not suggesting that. So you know your stuff. For example, that GST stuff I was talking about that we're looking at in introductory financial accounting. Stuff like that that's just basic things. You need to know what you're looking at with the financial statements, whether it's inclusive or exclusive GST, don't you, when you're looking at revenue and stuff. You need to know those things, and you get that through practice and repetition and stuff. But that's not enough. If you want an administrative job, that is enough. In fact, you sort of get told what to do and you do it. That's good, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But in professional work, it's much more, is what you're saying there. and you need to be able to give advice, give opinions, and give your reasons for them and say them convincingly. And I like it. There's much more than just numbers. Accounting is a lot more. Accounting isn't really about numbers. Accounting is about connecting to the business, and you're using numbers to help you do that. Is that your sort of thinking?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great, Melissa. And are you finishing your degree this term or not?
No, I'm only about 2/3 of the way through. I've still got all my electives.
Oh, good. Okay. So that's great. And are you studying full-time or part-time?
Part-time at the moment.
Yeah. That's great. So don't trust share prices as a value of a company. Oh, who said that?
That one was mine.
Is that a
Yeah.
bet, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
Well, I've been doing a lot of research, and for my company, all these articles, basically everyone I find has said, oh, the share price, it's looking great, it's so strong, it's gone up. But either my calculations are all wrong, or they've got it wrong. Because what I've found so far is not that it's that great, but something that they're doing is obviously very different, because they seem to think that things are going great and things are getting better. So, yeah, I'm not trusting.
It's good. I mean, if you're going to invest your own money, or if you're going to make investment decisions in a company of other people's money, you need to form your own views. Sort of what you're saying. Don't just trust what other people say. So possibly a lot of the brokers' reports or other things are sort of saying buy, you know. So what's some of the key reasons why you have some concerns about your firm?
Well, when I looked at the earnings per share, that ratio, my results didn't come back that great. But I found another article that said that it had been increasing for the past 4 years. But I think because they're including everything in their calculation and ours is just the operating, for them it probably does look like that. But on my end, it's, not looking as good.
So if you take, you know how you separate the operating and financial activities, and we talk about levered and unlevered ratios and that sort of thing, you can see that you can move your earnings figures by increasing your leverage, but you're also increasing the risk, you know, the riskiness of the business as well in that process. So what you're saying is you've disentangled, say, earnings per share. You've looked at earnings per share based on operating income rather than net profit after tax, and you're seeing a slightly different story. Yeah, so there's lots of stories in there, and it's sort of like a little world to be discovered. And I'm certainly of that thinking myself, that I don't trust the share prices. I don't really pay any attention to the share prices, except if you want to buy or sell the stock. Then you've got to figure out whether you think whether the share price represents good value if you're going to buy it, or it's overvaluing it if you want to sell. But that's right. That is a tenet of what we've looked at, and people can have different views on this, but it's Warren Buffett's comment: price is what you pay, value is what you get. They're not necessarily the same things. We don't have to be right or wrong. You just have to be better than average. Who said that comment? I like this so much. You know, it is so good. It's university, you can sort of sometimes think I've got to get an HD to be brilliant or a distinction. In the real world, you only have to be above average. It's true on a lot of things, and often average isn't all that good. You know, like people aren't really focused necessarily too much on it, and so yeah. And Warren Buffett, again, he's been a successful investor. If we look at the investing experience, he's been doing that for 50 years or more. He's earned on average 20%. I think it's 20.9% per year compound over 50 years. And the share market over that time has done 9.8, I think is the latest figure. Share market does around 10% a year, long term. And so you say, oh, well, he did 10% more. Well, man, 20%, if you can do 20% every year and compare the market 10, you get seriously rich. Compounding, and that, over time, that just goes berserk. So you just have to be above average. You don't have to be perfect. And of course, when you're dealing with the future, when we're giving advice in accounting, not just investing, but any advice, you're always, in business, you're always dealing with the future. Nobody knows the future, for sure. We might have some strong views, we might have some less strong views, but there isn't a question of being right or wrong. It's a question of whether you've thought about all the issues well and are able to form convincing views about it that are likely to be above average in terms of being good advice. All right. So that's all right. We've got 3 of those. So there's something to think about and reflect on about what you're learning. Now, what questions do you have? Here's a chance. You can ask whatever questions you like. It doesn't matter what they are. You can ask whatever you like. As long as I have some idea of the answer, I'll answer them. What questions would you like answered now? Anything at all. I'll give you 1 minute. "15 seconds. What question do you have? What burning question would you like the answer to? Or any question?" All right, we've got the first question. Keep the questions coming in. I've got 2 now. Right, keep the questions coming in. We'll start looking at them. First question, what do you do when you get your analysis wrong? Is there anything you can do? Well, there's 2 elements to that question, 2 elements to answer that question. What do you do when you get your analysis wrong? Well, our analysis will be wrong to some extent because we're dealing with the future. I'm just updating our study guide for next year at the moment because I've got the Ryman's new figures and I just have a bit of a think about it and improve it a bit. And the other day I was going through the chapter 5 where I've got my forecasts for Ryman Healthcare and I'm updating it with the actual numbers. It's a very good process to do each year. And so you look at how accurate your forecasts were for just 1 year ahead, let alone a few years ahead. And there's always unders and overs. Or are they broadly right or have you got something seriously wrong? And so you can look at your analysis after the event to see how close it was to what actually happened. And if you do that, say it's going to be different to some extent, and say you look at the reasons why it's different to what you thought, and why did I miss something, or what was it, or did some unexpected thing, and so you analyse the differences, if you like. Was it because there was, some of the economic and business drivers that I forecast them in ways that they occurred differently to what I expected. So you find the reasons within the framework, and that's all part of a learning process. But you will be wrong to some extent. If you're wrong by a long way, particularly if it's negatively a long way, that's not so good. But so you can do that. The other way you can do it is beforehand. You're doing some analysis and you're discussing it with other people, and they challenge you on some of your assumptions or some of the elements, and you can improve them in advance. So someone might say, Martin, your forecasts of house prices, have you thought about this and this, about what's going on? And, in New Zealand, Auckland's picking up, but the rest of the country's in the doldrums. Have you thought about how to think about that in terms of some of your assumptions? And so it's those discussions beforehand that can help tease that out a bit. And then afterwards, it's a sort of a learning experience. Oh, I see. Without accounting knowledge, where is it? What do you do when you get your analysis wrong? Is there anything you can do? And of course, the other element of that is there's commitment. A lot of these analyses we're talking about are capital decisions. They're long-term investment decisions we might make in a business or invest in a company. And so they have long-term impacts. And so if you get it seriously wrong, it can be quite a long ride, or you have to cut your losses early. I suppose what I do, if I get things wrong, my approach is to cut my losses early. If I form the view that I've gone down a road that's not going to end well, get out quick, and let the good ones run. If you're on a ship like Ryman Healthcare, just let it go. Until there comes a time when you should get off. But so there's some thoughts on that. But analyses, we assess analyses which are about the future in retrospect once the future happens. Everybody's an expert then, but it's the judgments beforehand, and it's the quality of those that increases the likelihood that we'll make good judgments. Now, who asked that question? Or who asked that question?
That was me again, Martin,
Yvette. So did that answer it, or did you want to ask a follow-on?
Yeah, no, that answered it really well.
All right.
So you're basically saying you learn from what you've done in the past and you make decisions based on what you learn.
Yeah, well, particularly when you're starting out, you make lots of mistakes because you're learning. And so you learn. And but if you want to reduce the number of mistakes you make, discuss with others on the way. But that's right. So as you're getting into the workforce too, there's a lot to learn. You just learn, and you learn from your colleagues and other people you work with. If you can learn from some good operators who are a bit further along, it's great. Yeah. And you get good. I've known some people who've got really good at stuff, certain things. It's always everybody I know who's got good at things, they had to work at it. It was hard work. It took a lot of focus, energy, effort, So think about it. If you've got good at anything, and particularly in sport, people get quite good at stuff quite early on. In business, it can usually be a bit later. Though some of these entrepreneurs can do quite well pretty early on. It's how do you do that? How did I do that if it was in aspects? And you've got to do a lot of it, and you've got to work at it, and you just got to keep at it. And it's a lot of work and focus. That's if you want to get good at certain things. And so being interested in it is quite important, isn't it? That'll keep you going. I've got very specific skills in certain areas, and I've just kept at it, and I'm still interested in them today. And when my brother, who's older than me, he came over for a few weeks recently from London. He's still in the IT area. He's been in the IT area all his life in London, and he's still having a great time. So he just really likes the specific things he's doing. I mean, it's all changing. You've got to be learning and changing, but he likes that. So some people, if you get good at it, if you like something, you'll be better at it probably, or you will be. If share prices are irrelevant, how can the average person without accounting knowledge assess the value of a company before investing? Well, my answer to that is you can't. You need the accounting knowledge. If you can't read accounts, if you can't do that, my view is it's a lucky dip really in terms of investing. Accounting is the key skill in business, particularly if you get in more senior levels. You need to be able to understand what the numbers are saying in order to be able to make decisions, because you need to be using those numbers along with other information. So if you can't tell the numbers, you're going to just accept them superficially. And we know they're full of judgments, and we know there's all sorts of stories embedded in them. If you don't have that accounting knowledge, I think you can't do it, is my view. Share prices aren't irrelevant, they're what we trade at. And the same in any markets, as firms are involved in, we trade in markets. They might be the supplier markets, with suppliers and labour markets and so forth, but also with customers and so forth. We're trading in dollars. We always have to turn everything into dollars. And the same with the capital markets. The shares of Roman Healthcare trade in dollars. So the share prices aren't irrelevant to the extent that that's where we'll be trading when we do trade. But for the rest of the time, I totally agree that they're completely irrelevant. But the value is what I keep an eye on. Who asked that question?
I did.
Oh, you did? Did that answer it? Or did you?
Yeah, I get a lot of people asking me to you've done all this study. What's the best company to invest in? And it's like, well, you have to do your own research. And they said, well, I don't have an accounting background. So they need one.
Yeah, they want tips. Yeah, I don't give tips myself
No,
because it may not end well, for them. And if I've got any good tips, why am I going to tell you anyway,
Right.
So it's, I don't give tips. And also, obviously, I'm in teaching here. I want people to learn their own skills and to develop their own capacities. We all want it. We all want the easy street. We all want to be sitting by the pool drinking our, gin and tonics or whatever, and somebody else doing all the work. We sort of all, it's not a good attitude actually, but we can easily fall into that. But, good luck on that approach. It's, everybody who I've known's got any good at anything, they've had to work at it. In our key value driver worksheet, we have that our return on net operating assets in the years from 2016 to 2018 is a result of our current operating income with our previous net operating assets, and why our economic profit is the result of our current operating income with our previous net operating assets as well. As they come, different results from what we have in the ratios worksheet. That's a good question. Who's asked this question?
Me.
Maria in Brisbane.
Maria in Brisbane. Hello, Maria. Hi. Yeah, so you can see there are judgments all through accounting. There's a judgments not only in interpreting ratios, but in also calculating them. There are many different ways of calculating the same ratio. And I think I was referring to that before. So one of the issues is if our net operating assets is growing strongly, like is the case in Ryman's, then and it's growing steadily, I use average. Because if you use opening or closing, you'll get quite different figures, or average, you get different figures. So we need to make a judgment about whether we use opening, closing, or average figures in calculating ratios. And the key thing to keep in mind, Maria, is that ratios are a relationship between two items. So if we're looking at return on net operating assets, it's a relationship between operating income and net operating assets, and we want them to be on the same basis. So we need them to be, with the same order of magnitude, which isn't an issue in that ratio, but also the operating income is for the period, say 2018, and what net operating assets do we want to compare it with? If your net operating assets are basically constant through the year and don't change, then it won't matter whether you use opening net operating assets, closing net operating assets, or average. It won't matter. So that's fine. But if we use, but if it's varied a lot during the year, you can make a judgment about it. For example, with Ryman's, I use average because it's just growing steadily. But your firm might make a major acquisition, right at the end of the year, towards the end of the year. And so they'll say right near the beginning of the year, just after the beginning of the year. And so for most of the year, you had the high level. So that would be closing. So there were some judgments to make. Now, what we've got in the spreadsheet is we haven't used average net operating assets in the ratios in the formulae. And I think what you might be getting towards is, I've hardwired certain things in the spreadsheet. Is that what you're saying with the valuation? Yeah, that's
Yes.
right. I've hardwired them. I'm getting where you're coming from. Don't affect any of my hardwiring. There is a little bit of magic behind the scenes. And I'm just sort of keeping a cover over it this is still in teaching this subject. I'm just seeing what people are capable of. But I've hardwired it like that because what we want to make sure is that the two valuation methods come up with the same answer, DCF and economic profit. And in order to do that, I needed to make sure that we're using certain figures in terms of the net operating assets and so forth. And you're right, they can be different to the net operating figures you used in some of your ratios. But the reason for that is I'm wanting to make sure that the valuation model will deliver the same result for both methods. So I've hardwired those in. Yeah. You might like to ask a follow-on question, Maria.
Have you got any other questions?
No, it's all right.
No.
Did I
Okay,
answer it a bit?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's good. You won't be the only person to ponder that, how some of the numbers in that little spreadsheet further on are different to some of your ratios, but that's the reason. And but as I get a little bit more confident that people can work through these sorts of issues, I might sort of loosen up a few things with the valuation model. But what I don't want is people to get sort of lost in some of the technical detail. And that's good. Any other questions? Well, we're going to have a little look at a video, but before we do that, for those who are finishing or nearly finishing, some people we do have some opportunities for marking coming up. We do have them over time. And so if you're going to be graduating reasonably soon, if you do have an interest in talking to me about some of those opportunities, you can email me, and it's just m.turner.cq.edu.au. And so there are some opportunities for doing that. So I'm happy to talk to you if you have some interest in that. Some of the past students we've had involved in our units marking, get a lot out of it in terms of cementing their understanding of some of the key concepts. Best way to learn is to teach, and that includes doing marking, giving feedback, and so forth. So if you have an interest in that, please contact me. Now, there's some great videos, lots of great short videos in the unit, but I thought I'd show one of them from this week, which is It's Now Up to You. Are you wondering what are the takeaways for you in our unit? In this video, we look at what next after we finish our unit. It is now up to you. It is my desire that this unit will help you develop a lifelong interest in improving and growing your skills in analysing financial statements and in allocating scarce capital. This is a skill and interest, and for some a passion, which will always be needed in our communities. It can also help you to change the way you view business and how you make sense of the financial statements of firms. I leave you now with a personal challenge to develop your own tools in your professional and personal business and investing lives. This unit gives you a starting point. This is something useful and not to be underestimated. You never get anywhere unless you start. The journey is yours and can take you a long way further than we have gone together so far. Financial statement analysis requires a mixture of technical skills and judgments. Technical skills can be learnt, Courses, seminars, conversations, working alongside skillful practitioners can all assist us to learn these technical skills. It also requires genuine application and persistence. Genuine interest, even passion, can help us persevere until we reach real proficiency and skill. This means not just learning a few words, a few concepts, or some disconnected facts. It does not mean memorizing these things and reproducing them in assessments and being awarded grades. It does not mean getting a degree I can frame and put on the wall. Real proficiency and skill means none of these. It means more than learning imitation accounting or imitation finance. It means more than pretending to be able to analyse a firm's financial statements, either pretending to myself or to others. Mastering the technical skills takes practice. With a degree of perseverance, application, and genuine interest and pleasure, these technical skills can be mastered by many people. Becoming good at making sound judgments cannot be learnt quite so readily. It requires some talent, but also action, mistakes, successes, and disappointments. It requires working with and getting alongside seasoned and experienced individuals. It involves becoming an active part of a community of practitioners in accounting and finance, and in business more generally. In financial statement analysis, judgments need to be made about the past, present, and future, and all are difficult. The most important judgments in financial statement analysis relate to the future, and who knows what the future will hold. Yet in allocating scarce capital to competing potential uses, these judgments need to be made. Indeed, these judgments have real effects and real impacts on real people's lives. These judgments need to be made by someone. Why not by you? And why not make these judgments with skill and insight so that you are able to positively contribute to the futures of our communities? Financial statement analysis can help us understand the economic and business realities of firms, but it also empowers us to be able to influence and change these very realities. We can learn to use financial statements and other sources of information to engage with the economic and business realities that involve real resources and real people's lives. Ever wondered why in Australia we have plenty of food, clothing and shelter? Why we have cars and phones and entertainment options, hospitals and medical centres, and indeed tertiary institutions? Real, genuine, grinding poverty has been largely, though not totally, eradicated in our country. All aspects of our economy and society have required material resources to be applied to their development and creation in the past. They did not just come out of thin air. Previous generations have left an economic and social legacy for us based partly on how well or how poorly they have allocated capital to competing uses in the past. I sat on the board of the Dressmark Group of companies for several years with a fellow investor and director, John Bougen. In 2003, John travelled to almost every country in the world in 167 days. They made it to 191 countries. At that time, there were 193 sovereign nations. They managed to miss 2 of them. Quite careless, I thought. But they did manage to make it into the Guinness Book of Records for their efforts. No one in the world has yet been so misguided as to attempt a similar feat. John saw a cross-section of the world. He saw at roughly the same time the nations of the world. He asked a child in each country what their dream was and took their photo. He included a number of these photos and dreams in a book, My Dream, Listen to the Children. One thing John mentioned to me on his return from his trip was almost everyone in the world is living in poverty. He saw enormous poverty throughout the world. The economic legacy that billions of people alive today have inherited is one of poverty. Developing skills in financial statement analysis can help us contribute to our whole community and society, not just to ourselves, by becoming truly skillful at allocating scarce capital. This will touch many people's lives. Well, there we are. Here's the book. Actually, I pulled it off my shelf that John pulled together. It's great. All these dreams of children from around the world, from each country that he went to. Well, there we have it. It's now up to you what you take with you from your degree and from your unit. But accounting is not a game. It's part of contributing to businesses, also to investing if you're an investor. And so there are real skills to develop, and they can have real impacts on real people. So is anything anyone would like to raise before we finish today? If not, I'll say goodbye to Cairns. Are you up there in Cairns? Justin, are you up there? Are you in Mackay? Hannah, are you there in Mackay? Maybe not. I can see Maria is there in Brisbane. See you later, Maria. Look forward to reading your final assignment.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks.
You've been doing some great work. Anyone else in Brisbane? No?
No, not today.
And Melissa in Bundaberg. See you later, Melissa.
See ya.
All the best. And Yvette and Sarah on Zoom. Is there anyone else? See you later, guys. Look forward to reading your final assignments.
Thank you, Martin. See you later.
Thank you. And is there anyone else? All right. Well, I'll say goodbye now. Bye-bye.